Hi, everybody. Good evening, and thank you for joining me for another lesson in Tanya. We are holding towards the end of chapter 4, Perek Dalet. Just to refresh our mind for what we've studied last week. The Rabbi began explaining that the soul, each one of the souls, remember the souls are divided into three parts that we know of in our body. There are two other parts, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama. The soul is a part of God, but that part of God is divided into three levels. However, the soul was given garments, clothing, in which the soul is able to express itself. Usually, your garments are much less important than the wearer. I can afford fancy garments because I make a good living. Someone who cannot afford is wearing shmates. Everybody according to their ability. So the greater you are, the more you spend on garments. But the garments are never to be more valuable than the person himself wearing it. If someone is going through fire and he's saved, he's not going to cry about their garments, but be thankful that his hands and feet are intact. Garments are not as valuable as the person wearing the garments. Yet, says the Rabbi, the garments of thought, speech, and action, the three channels in which God enabled us to connect to God, are more valuable than the soul itself, as we will discover now. And the reason is because God desired to express himself in the lowest of the low realm, in the lowest level possible. And therefore he created many, many curtains and many universes so that the universe, a materialistic, physical universe, can be created where God is totally concealed and is unable to, no one can trace God as the creator of the universe. And yet we will be told to please God, we have to do or study, etc. By doing so, we are able to please God in a way that nobody else in essence is able to. And therefore, so there were two more points that I shared last week. The Rebbe compares, based on the Talmud, the Torah like water. In other words, it's not like a light, a ray of light that comes from the sun that goes to the lowest level, because the ray of light is not the essence of the light, it's a reflection of the light. In fact, by the way, sunlight should be a better expression, a better example, because sun's ray, the farther they are from the sun, the more powerful they are. A desert is a very hot place because it's a deep space in the universe. Mountains that are closer to the sun have snow continuously because they are much closer to the sun. I know I did not study science ever, so I know some people can try and explain it different ways, but that's the way I study that. And that is, the farther you go from the sun, the more powerful the ray is. And therefore, the lowest level in the universe is where the sun is able to be a much greater impact. Yet the Rebbe is not using the example of a sun simply because the sun sends out the ray, but not the sun itself. The sun is not here, it's the sun's ray that lights or heat up. When it comes to water, it's the same water up there that you find down here. In other words, God's wisdom came down into this universe in the Torah, exactly the way it is up in the spiritual realms or in God himself. And performing of mitzvot is the actual way of pleasing God. And in that way, no one else who do not possess those three garments is able to serve God in that level. So I think I gave you an example that I like to share. You have three ways to connect with your spouse. I'm going to talk about spouse because it's a choice. And if we are not behaving, we can be separated. If I tell my wife, or I think all the way that I'm loving her, or speaking about how much I love my spouse, it goes very far, but not too far. But what if I'm constantly acting and involved in action to prove or to express my love? This is something that makes an impact. The person is impacted by it in much greater level, much deeper than speech or thought. The same is with God. In other words, the lower the vessel or the garment, the more powerful it becomes. Action is farther removed from thought or speech, yet action is the one that determines whether I really love my spouse or not. If I only speak that way, or I only think about it, even though thinking is much more powerful and it's much greater faculty, it does not express the true me. I express true me in action, definitely more than speech and thought. If I want to serve God, it's in this physical universe. In the realm of speech, it's this world of Yetzirah. In the realm of thought, which is the world of Bria, the angels, those who are living there, they may express themselves that they love God and they actually pray to God and they get consumed by God's fire, but it's not the same as someone taking out of their time because they have a choice and they give their time to study Torah like we do tonight, or they go and pray, or they say something kind or good word. That action is the way that moves God. And nothing else that's above us and greater than us is able to move God. And that's why, according to Kabbalah, as we're about to discover, in this universe, the garments are much more valuable, powerful than the soul itself, because without those garments, the soul is unable to connect to God, is unable to perform, is unable to achieve its mission that was sent down here. So imagine you're sent into a job site, and they ask you to dig holes, and they don't give you tools. They don't give you the tractor. They don't give you all the tools that you need, shovels, etc. You're sitting there and baking by the sun. At the end of the day, you're not going to get paid, and you're going to get dehydrated. The tools are the ones that enable us to achieve our mission that we were sent for. And this is where we are holding. And that will help us understand one more statement that is said by the Talmud, that there is no better way to explain it other than the Kabbalah based on what we studied today. We are on page 86 in the middle. Thus, the Torah clothes itself in material objects with which the mitzvot are performed. Says the Rabbi, and also in the physical letters combinations written with ink in a book, namely the 24 books of Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim. As mentioned above, the letters and words contain the holiness of God's will and wisdom. And those of us who attend JLI in the lesson 2, we will discover the exact details, the powerful distinction between oral Torah and written Torah. And I think I mentioned last week that in the written Torah, even just the words without understanding them, just saying those words, we connect to God and fulfill the mitzvah of studying Torah. Why? Torah underwent this great descent, just like the soul. Remember, we spoke about the chain that it goes through 4 universes. Each universe will go through 10 levels. The same as the Torah went through 4 universes and 10 levels in each universe. So it went down on a very long way before it enters into the universe. The Torah underwent this great descent so that every human thought be able to grasp them, and so that even speech and action, which are on a level lower than thought, be able to grasp them, God's will and wisdom, and clothe themselves in them by performing the commandments in speech and action. In other words, there is nobody that can be excused from serving God. If it was all about lofty thoughts, you can say somebody has no sitzfleisch. He has no ability to sit for Torah. I have a brother, very smart, very successful businessman, but when it comes to study, he cannot study Torah. He cannot sit for too long on his behind. It's impossible. Some people, their mindset, they are today we have terminology, ADHD, ADHD, HDD. There's all kinds of names for it. I'm not here to mock or to politically correct, incorrect speech. All I'm saying is that when it comes to thought and speech, there are barriers. Not everybody is capable. Not everybody can connect. When it comes to action, there is no one who can be excused. There is no way someone can say, I cannot pray by moving my lips. There is no one who can say, I cannot eat matzah on Passover. There is no one who can say, I cannot keep kosher. This is something that's an equalizer. Because in action, that's why when someone says, I love you to a spouse, and they don't demonstrate in action, they have no excuse. There's no excuse. If it was all about thinking how much I love my spouse, not everybody can think about it. If it was about speech, not everybody can express, articulate themselves that way. But it's about action. If you say you love somebody, you have to demonstrate with action. There is no excuse other than you don't really mean what you say. That's how powerful action is. Because the way God created, because the way the Torah came down and the serving of God came down, is action comes before anything else, and nothing else can be compared to.
That's why we have flowers.
And flowers is a good example, yes. And chocolate. Now, since Torah and its commandments clothe all 10 faculties of the soul, and all of the soul's 613 organs from head to foot, that is from the highest level of the head, its head, to its lowest level. We spoke about the 613, 245 body parts, 365 veins, correspond to 613 commandments, and we delved into it last week in details. Therefore, the soul is truly completely bound up with God in the bond of life, and the very light of God envelopes and clothes it from head to foot. Says the Rabbi, when you involve in studying Torah, God's Torah, when you involve in performing good deeds, doing a mitzvah, what you do is you create a circle of spirituality, godliness that connect to you. There is no other way to connect to God. So it is written, God is my rock, in whom I take refuge, and naturally only that which surrounds a person can protect him. And it is further written, as with a shield, God's will surround him, says King David, that God is my rock. God is my shield. How is it possible that it can be my shield? By studying Torah, by performing mitzvot. God creates a shield that protects a human being and does not exist with angels and does not exist in any other place. Meaning, his will and wisdom that are clothed in Torah and its commandments are creating a shield and a covering to the human. We see at any rate that although God's wisdom and will are beyond man's reach, they are made accessible to him because the Torah is clothed in physical terms and its commandments are vested in physical objects. For this reason, so far so good, no questions? Everything is clear? Huh? Yes or no?
It's getting there.
Getting there. Okay. For this reason, it has been said, 1 hour of repentance and good deeds in this world is better than the whole life of the world to come. Anybody heard that phrase before? Ethics of our fathers. Anybody heard of ethics of our fathers? It's a Mishnah, chapter 4, Mishnah 17 tells us 1 hour of serving God fully is more valuable than all of existence in the world to come, in heaven. And one can ask, how is it possible? Don't we serve God here to acquire heaven? You get paid more, at least as equal to your investment. If I purchase this for $1 and I sell it for 80 cents, I may as well not even do business because I lose. Huh? There is a famous song in Yiddish, Hey Johnny, Johnny. It's in Russia, actually. Ech tiduri, ech tiduri, to Marko, ne koplaish, ne prodaish, tolka, vodka, budye, something like that. Vodka is one of them. It's about, hey, Johnny, 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 what are you doing in the market? You don't buy, you don't sell, all you do is smell. In Russia, it is you buy and sell, but you don't make any profit. So you wasted a day. That's the Hasidic song. That's the translation into English, the Johnny, Johnny. The song said, this is a guy coming to a bar and he's waiting to get to a bar to take a little drink, but he wasted his life. What the point is, if I come to the universe and it is for getting rewarded in the world to come, how is it possible the sage, by the way, this is not Kabbalah. When people ask, I say it's a Mishnah. Go and study Mishnah. It's part of Jewish tradition, that if you give all of the world to come back to somebody, he will pay you with 1 hour of good deeds and study Torah in this universe. That's how powerful this universe is. And the reason is, as the Rabbi is going to explain, and here is the explanation, page 88. For the reward in the world to come consists of enjoying the radiance of the divine presence. It is the pleasure derived from comprehension of godliness. Now, no created being, even a spiritual being of the highest realms, such as angels or souls, can comprehend any more than a glimmer of the divine light. That's why, for this reason, the reward of the souls in the world to come is referred to as the radiance of the divine presence. It's not divine presence, but radiance, since it is no more than a remote gleam of the divine light. But as for the essence and glory of the Holy One, blessed be He, the essence of God, no thought can apprehend Him at all, except only when it apprehends and clothes itself in Torah and its mitzvot, does it grasp and clothe itself in God's Himself. For the Torah and the Holy One, blessed be He, are one and the same. By the way, this is a chidush. This is a new teaching of the Alter Rebbe that no one else explained before, and nobody understood what the Mishnah is referring to. But this is what the Rebbe is saying. The world to come, no matter how pleasurable and how great it is all about a glimpse of God's radiance. But in this universe, when you study Torah or when you perform God's commandments, you honor your father and mother, you keep the Shabbat, you eat kosher, you connect to the essence of God. And this is nothing can be compared to. And therefore, 1 hour of connection to God is much, much greater, brings us to a much loftier level than all of the world to come. Because in the world to come, all we can reach is a glimmer of God's radiance, but not God Himself. Here we get into God Himself and we serve God. So it may not be my ego, because if you're asking me the pleasure, here there's no pleasure. I have to pay for serving God. And it's a challenge. It doesn't make sense. It's very hard. On the other hand, the connection with God is to the essence of God. When it comes to the world to come, there is no connection to God. It's all a relationship with God's radiance. Did everybody understand what I said? Yes or no? Not so much? Harry?
Yeah. I can't understand why once you get to the next world, you get a glimmer of God, or it's close to God Himself.
The answer is there is no God Himself. It's impossible. Only a glimmer of God's radiance.
Where the angels stand with this?
They are far removed from God. They are not connected to God, not even to the radiance of God. They're spiritual beings, just like a physical being, but we have two souls, the evil and the good soul. They don't have an evil soul. By the way, angels do sin, but it's very rare.
Angels do what?
Angels
Sin.
see him,
But it's extremely rare.
They do sin.
see him.
Sing, S-I-N-G, or sing?
S-I-N, sin,
Sins.
commit a crime. It happens, but it's extremely rare. They have no free choice. They have no evil desire. So they do exactly as God had commanded them. Also, when we say angels, it varies. There are different understanding of what angels are. An angel can be a human being. An angel, according to Maimonides, is a creature, an animal that is made of spiritual entities like fire and wind, but it's also physical. We can see and we can hear. And angels in the higher realm, Bria and Bria, it's not even an entity. It's something was created to serve God, to achieve a mission. When God wants somebody to get a message, he sends an angel. That's why an angel cannot perform more than one task. Anybody heard about that? Why are there 3 angels to Abraham? Why? What's wrong with one? Because each one had a mission. One to tell Sarah she's going to have a child. Another one was to destroy Sodom. And the third one to save Lot and his wife and family. So each one had to be sent for, because, so there is only one. The word angel in Hebrew, malach, is agent, a messenger. A messenger can be, God creates a messenger, and as soon as the messenger fulfills its mission, there is no more mission, there is no more angel. So the idea of angels is not just 4 wings or 6 wings. It depends in which level. There are some levels where angels are. Rambam, Maimonides says that angels are made of fire and wind. We are made, there are 4 elements. Remember we talked about the 4 elements? Water, earth, fire, and wind. Earthly, why are we called earthly creatures? Because we were created from the earth, right? There are 2 lofty, wind and fire, and there are 2 that are more materialist, and they are water and earth. We are made mostly of earth and water, liquid. The liquid in our body is, who knows, a third, maybe even 2/3, I don't know, but it's a lot. The wind and the fire that exists with us is very minute, very small, but it has to have all 4. Angels is the opposite, according to Rambam. Angels are being physical, but their physical is very minute. They're made out of more of wind and fire, and a little bit water and earth. Therefore, they can fly, they can move around, they can be in 2 places at the same time. But Rambam is talking about angels within our universe. God's angels are a whole different story. There are, as I said, angels are only for a task. As soon as the task is fulfilled, there is no angels. Then you have ministers, angels who are ministers, who are in charge, like Michael, Raphael, each one has a task. So this is not a lesson about angels. All I'm saying is that you need to get used to the idea that serving God, we are the only one. How do we serve God? By giving a penny to the poor, by keeping Shabbat, by eating kosher. Our connection to God is not to a radiance of God, but to God himself, because God's desire and God's will and God's wisdom came down here like water. Therefore, the world to come, afterlife, where you cannot wear a tzitzit, you cannot light Shabbat candles, you cannot eat on Shabbat a good tasty or drink kosher wine and make kiddush. Our connection to God is only, and the pleasure that comes with it is only to a radiance of God. It's not the essence. It's something far removed from God. And therefore, all of the world to come, from the beginning till the end, has no value compared to 1 hour. By the way, 1 hour is not necessarily 60 minutes. It's 1 turn. In Hebrew, Sha'ah is also a full circle of minutes, 60 minutes. But also when by Cain and Abel, anybody familiar with Cain and Abel? They bought sacrifices. It says Vel Cain vel minchato, to Cain and his gift lo Sha'ah. God had not paid attention. Sha'ah means to pay attention, to make a turn. So if I am now sitting and studying Torah and I am serving God, I don't do it because my parents make me do it or because I have to pass a test, but because I've made a choice. I am connecting to the essence of God. In the world to come, no matter how lofty and how great they are and how much they achieve in this universe, their connection with godliness is only to a radiance of God, an extension that came out, just like a ray of light that came out. It's not the essence. We have a connection with the essence. Let me share with you a story. Okay? The second Lubavitch Rabbi, his name is the Mittler Rabbi, and the third Lubavitch Rabbi is called the Tzemach Tzedek. They lived about 200 years ago. They had giant Hasidim, even though they were followers of the Rabbi, but they themselves were told they were half rabbis because they used to teach Torah. One of them is Rabbi Hillel of Parich. Parich is a town in Poland, and he was the rabbi in there, but he was a half a Rebbe. So the Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe, the second Rebbe and the third Rebbe used to send Hasidim to him to train them and teach them proper behavior and to connect to God. How did he do it? He used to tell them stories. But through stories, he connected them to God. The following is one of the stories. He told them many stories that we have many of them recorded. The previous Rebbe recorded it in his memoirs. And one of the stories is the following. I checked, and it's on Wikipedia, the following, what I tell you, so you can go and check the details. There is a photo of the gravesite, of the headstone of the man that I'm about to speak. The story goes like that. In 1222, a man was born. He later became the most famous rabbi in all of the Ashkenazi communities at the time. He was born in Germany. His name is the Maharam. Maharam is an acronym, Rabbeinu Meir. Maharam is made out of 4 letters. Moreinu Arav Rabbi Meir of Rothenburg. Rothenburg is a town in Germany. He later became a rabbi in Rothenburg, but before he was born in Salzburg. Salzburg is Salzburg. It's another town in Germany. He was born his father was a rabbi there, and he grew up, and as a young man, he became a rabbi in few communities until he moved to Rothenburg. In Rothenburg, he became the most famous rabbi, and he actually is the master of many, many rabbis that today, anyone who is serious about Jewish world is following them. In fact, in lesson 3 of our Booksmark, we're going to study a ruling by the Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher, who was one of the students of Maharam of Rothenburg. He was a very famous rabbi. He tried to escape to Israel. In those days, Jews were considered the slaves of the Tsar. Because why? So they paid higher taxes. So they were treated as second class, which was very common. But if you leave the country, it means you are the possession of the king. You ran away from your master. He was caught with his family in Italy. He was already in Italy, and he was brought back. Everything I checked, I as they say, double-checked with Wikipedia tonight. Maharam of Rothenburg was caught in Italy and was brought back. The king, the Tsar, the Caesar, put him in jail and demanded an extremely high ransom to redeem him. Harry, you know the story? So he demanded 20,000 marks. 20,000 marks was a huge sum. His students decided to do whatever they can to redeem him, and they collected most of the money. But then he ruled that he should not be ransomed because it was teach the Caesar that they can take the rabbi and demand ransom. And the Jewish law tells us that it's against that. Later, a rabbis questioned his ruling, but simply he did it because he wanted the Caesar to know that it's not a way to acquire funds, because if he's successful, he will do with another rabbi the same. He was in jail for 7 years. They refused to allow himself to be ransomed. In 7 years, he wrote books and rulings. A lot of his rulings are where he writes that he is in jail and he died in prison. The Caesar refused to allow for his body to be released, to be buried. For 14 years, they kept his body. 14 years later, one of a simple man that was inspired by the rabbi many years earlier decided 14 years is too much, he has to redeem him. So he went and he asked how much the money is needed, and he sold all his business, he sold all his house, he sold everything, and he paid the ransom for the rabbi to be buried in Rothenburg, in Varmaisa, actually. It's a town nearby the cemetery was, where the cemetery was. And today you have the headstone from 1262, I think. You have this, by the way, on the headstone, you have the story in Hebrew that he died in prison. 14 years later, it says the date he died, and 14 years, and the day he was brought to burial 14 years later. The next night, Rabbi Meir, the Maharam, came in a dream to this man, Alexander Shlomo, Alexander Ziskind, Bereb Shlomo. And he says to him, you did a great kind act for me for putting my body to rest. You have two choices. You can either become extremely wealthy and it will pass on to your children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren forever. They'll always be very wealthy. Or you can go straight to heaven. What would you choose?
Straight to heaven.
Straight to heaven.
That's selfish.
Huh?
Selfish.
Why?
Because you generate.
And being rich?
Just for yourself. No.
Ah,
just to the generations generate.
Rabbi, being rich, you want things to get yourself to heaven anyway.
Being rich can enable you to buy a better penthouse up in heaven, correct? Waterfront, etc., right? You know the story about this Jew who had nothing to do with Yiddishkeit. But when he died, his son came to synagogue and told the rabbi, I want to make something special for my father. And the rabbi says, we need a synagogue. So the man says, how much? And he says, $1 million. And the man says, for my father, I'll do anything. He wrote a check for $1 million. So up in heaven, God turned to the man and says, your son did such a good act, you go straight to the penthouse, straight to heaven. A week later, the door opens up to heaven, and angels with eyes everywhere and thorns, and the angel of death, dark with thorns, comes around, finds this Johnny, grabs him and says, come on, we're going. He takes him down. They go down all the way to the basement. The basement is half with black water, and there's all kinds of snakes there. They open up the elevator door and he dumps them there in hell. So Johnny turned to the angel and says, what happened? He says, remember the check your son gave in your honor? It just bounced. So
what did the man choose, heaven or?
the man chose heaven, and he died the next day. He told the story within a week, I think. He died, and he's buried right next to him.
Is there a right decision?
Ah,
Is there a right decision?
I didn't finish the story. When I grew up, the teachers would tell us, you don't ask questions on that story. That's the way it happens. You don't ask questions. Now we're going to go back to Rabbi Hillel of Parich. He would tell that story to the students, yeshiva boys, whoever the Rebbe sent. Remember, I told you the Rebbe would send them to inspire and raise them, and he would say to them, what Rabbi Alexander did, choosing heaven over wealth, was before the Hasidic teaching was revealed. This happened in the 13th century. But after the Alter Rebbe did, what he said is that 1 hour of good deeds in this universe is valued more than all of the world to come. Alexander should have chosen wealth, just merely for the ability to serve God in this universe. Because serving God, you connect to God himself. Heaven, you connect to God's ray, glimmer of radiance, not the essence. Now you understand the point? Does it make sense? Herman, yes, what do you have
So
to say?
that's why Jewish people work so hard to have a lot of money.
That's it.
The Chabad rabbis are making sure
That's-
that's so fast.
That's why I offer people to handle their money. But this is, by the way, the Mishnah of Ethics of Fathers, Pirkei Avot says that it's better, it's greater. Yafa means nicer or more beautiful or greater. 1 hour of this universe with good deeds and study of Torah than all of the world to come. There is no other way of explaining it. The only way is that the Alter Rebbe explained. The garments of the soul, remember we talked about the garments, that they are more powerful than the soul? Because they get you to God. The world to come. You sit on a beach chair on the beach or on a penthouse enjoying the waterfront, but it's a glimmer of God's radiance. It's not the essence. Imagine you looking at a video versus looking at your spouse. Imagine looking at a video of Hawaii versus being in Hawaii. This is the difference between a radiance. A radiance is a video. It can be 3D, 4K, whatever they do. It's not the real thing. The real thing is totally different. Now, I'm asking you, I'm offering you to sit here for 500 hours and watch how the cruise, being on a cruise, I think somebody offered that, wearing he's going to go out on vacations for you, he's going to do all the activities. Anybody heard about that? Somebody offered to wear a body camera where he goes to the zoo, he goes to the safari, he do climbing. You don't fall, you don't scratch yourself, you don't get thirsty. You just sit and watch as they do all the activities for you. They go climbing a mountain, they see the deer, they see a bear, they go on a jeep, they cook their steak. All the activities they want, they do for 500 days around the world. That's one choice. Another choice to take you on a private first-class plane, 4 jaws, 3 days in the safari, where you actually experience the safari for the first time, assuming you enjoy the outdoors. If you don't enjoy the outdoors, too bad. We'll offer you the Hawaii or somewhere and somewhere, beautiful place. There is no comparison. And the reason is anyone with a sane mind will tell you that the experience, the real experience with real people, with real nature is nowhere near watching a deer or watching a giraffe or a chimpanzee, even though the National Geographic's description of it is far, far better than you'll ever see. But there's no comment. You won't remember, you won't share that experience with anybody. But if you saw just a little bit, you will share. This is something that's engraved in you. Says the Rebbe, 1 hour of this universe, the connection established with God cannot be achieved in any other place. We have great connection to God. Our connection to God in the world to come is only the radiance of God. I have to say it over and over because I want to make sure everybody understands. Did you understand now? Harry?
Yes.
Okay. Now let's continue. I'm going to read again page 88 from top. For the reward in the world to come consists of enjoying the radiance of the divine presence. It is the pleasure derived from comprehension of godliness. Now, No created being, even a spiritual being of the higher realms, such as angels or souls, can comprehend any more than a glimmer of the divine light. For which reason, the reward of the souls in the world to come is referred to as the radiance of the divine presence, since it is no more than a remote gleam of the divine light. But as for the essence and glory of the Holy One, blessed be He, no thought can apprehend them at all. Only when it apprehends and clothes itself in Torah and its mitzvot, does it grasp and clothe itself in God Himself. For Torah and the Holy One, blessed be He, are one and the same. I hope we covered this idea. Now we're going to move on to one more idea, the Rabbi, before he concludes the chapter. Hence, the superiority of Torah and mitzvot in this world over the life of the world to come. In the world to come, the soul grasps only a glimmer of godliness. In this world, through Torah and mitzvot, it is united with God Himself. Now the Rabbi is going to talk about the fact that God's will is entered into this realm of physical, which seemed to be somehow God removing Himself. And this is what he's going to talk about. Although, page 89, although the Torah has been clothed in lowly material things, and it is only these material things that man's intellect grasps when studying Torah, not the essence of God's will and wisdom, says the Rabbi, it is, by way of illustration, like one who embraces a king. There is no difference in the degree of his closeness and attachment to the king, whether he embraces them when the king is wearing one robe or many robes. Why? Since the king's body is in them. In other words, similarly, when a Jew embraces God's wisdom in Torah study, the fact that his wisdom is clothed in material robes is irrelevant. Another example, the Rabbi is saying, another point understood from this analogy, in the study of Torah, man is also embraced, enveloped, and encompassed by God's wisdom that the Torah contains. As the Alter Rebbe continues, similarly, when the king embraces one with his arm, though it be dressed in his robes, to illustrate that Torah is analogous to a royal embrace, the Alter Rebbe quotes, as it is written, his right hand embraces me. What the Rabbi is saying is, if you meet the king, the President of the United States, and he wears gloves, and he shake your hand, did you miss any of that connection just because he's wearing a glove? Yes or no? No, why not? Because the president's hand is inside the glove, and therefore you made the connection. When a king hugs you, even though he touches your sweater or jacket, it doesn't matter how many. Can someone says, well, I was only wearing a shirt, you wore a sweater and a jacket, so the way you hugged or I hugged is much different. I got much closer to the president. It doesn't help. It doesn't matter. You know why? Because I am in my clothing and the king is dressed with his clothing. When he embraces me or I embrace the king, not his garments. So it doesn't matter how many outfits he wears, it's always the king himself I embrace. The Torah, God enclosed the Torah. Remember, we spoke about garments. Thought, speech, and action is garments. So the fact that there is garments does not take away that the essence exists within them. So when I study Torah, or when I celebrate Shabbat, or when I celebrate Purim, I celebrate a mitzvah. The mitzvah I celebrate is through the physical realm. I have to walk with my feet. I have to eat in my mouth. I have to help someone cross the street with my hands or with my feet. But that action is like the king robed himself with a shirt and pants and a jacket. When he hugs me or embraces me, Those elements are not a barrier between me and the king, and therefore the commandments we fulfill with God are the only connection to God's essence, and the fact that they come through the physical realm, the physical universe, is not to minimize or detract or separate between us and God. Did I make sense? Is it clear?
Yeah.
These ideas takes a long time to get, but this is the Tanya. These are new ideas, but once you understand them, it helps us serve God in everyday life in a much different way. We're ready for chapter 5. Are we ready for chapter 5? So we have 10 more minutes. Oh, I'm sorry. Page 90. We continue on page 90, the conclusion of chapter 4, which refers to Torah called the right hand, because Torah was given by God's right hand, for Torah is related to the attribute of chesed, kindness, and water. Here is the explanation. As explained in Kabbalah, the right hand represents both chesed and water. And as said earlier, Torah is compared to water. And the left hand represents gevura, severity, and fire. We discussed it before, the 10 attributes. Right hand is kindness, giving, helping. Also, it's water. Left hand is strictness, severity, boundaries. Also, fire, the opposite of water, red. And therefore, says the Rabbi, when the verse states that God's right hand embraces me, it says yamin. No, yamin is right. His right hand will embrace me. The intention is that God embraces and envelopes the soul through Torah, God's right hand, because that's what water is, and water is Torah. Thus, the bond that Torah study creates between the soul and God is twofold. The soul embraces God and is embraced by God. In this, Torah study is superior to other mitzvot, as discussed in the following chapter. This is a beginning, a little, so to say, cliff notes from chapter 5. So in chapter 4, in chapter 3, we talked about the 10 attributes, if you remember. And they are the reason love and fear are the source of all behavior, and therefore they are the source of serving God. Chapter 4, the Rabbi is talking about the 3 garments of the soul, that they are most superior to the soul itself because they connect directly to God. Nothing else can connect you to God. Not in the higher realms, no angels, nobody else. It's only to a radiance of God, an extension of God. Now the Rabbi is going to talk about the study of Torah is a mitzvah that is superior to all other mitzvot and is equal to all other mitzvot. Anybody heard that Torah study is equal to all other mitzvot? Every morning in prayer. Every morning in prayer we say, V'talmud Torah keneged kulam. Study of Torah is one mitzvah that equals all the commandments. If you want to perform all 613 commandments, study Torah. People ask me, Harry asked me recently, it says Jacob fulfilled all the 613 commandments when he sent messengers to Esau to tell him, Im Lavan Garti, v'shtaryag mishmot shamarti. And you ask me, how is it possible he kept the 613 commandments? Mitzvot he cannot perform outside of Israel. He was for 22 years outside of Israel. Tithing, contribution, there were many commandments that do not apply outside of Israel. So I said the answer I gave you until now was, as long as you do the maximum you can do, it's considered as if you filled all of the 613 commandments. Another explanation is study Torah. We know that he studied Torah. And therefore, if he studied Torah 14 years in the yeshiva of Shem and Ava, later on he studied Torah. When you study Torah, you fulfill all 613 commandments. Studying Torah is equal. The Rabbi will explain the reason from a spiritual point of view. And the spiritual point of view, I'm just going to share a little bit about that, is that when you study Torah, your mind is fully occupied with understanding what you're studying. You cannot think of something else while you're trying to understand something that a new idea. If I am busy, let's say, building something, I can do with both hands 2 separate things. People are able to. The Talmud teaches us there was a rabbi who was able to use 4 pens and write a full word at the same time, because they were able to concentrate on what they wanted. Just like my body works based on my will. I want to walk or I want to say something. I don't have to move different parts of the body with commands. It's naturally. They were able to naturally. They wanted to write a letter and they know how they want to express themselves. They would do it 4 times as fast as the fastest person you can think of, because they used all four pens they had. When it comes, so action, multitasking, you can chew a gum and walk, because we multitask. Today in this universe, if you don't multitask, you're out of this body, you don't belong here.
Can men multitask?
With the women's help. With women's help, yes. Yes.
So the Torah is compared to water, so they compared to fire.
It's also compared to fire, that's true, but everywhere in the Torah, this is just for a certain dimensions that fire can split into many, but the neshama is compared to fire, not the Torah. Ner Havaya Nishmas Odom. Neshama is compared to fire, to a flame, not the Torah. The Torah, where did we study it? That it's split in Rashi. Rashi brings like a hammer that on a metal that there are many sparks, and the Torah has many sparks that split out. But fire, where do you see it? I can't. I've learned not to argue with Harry, but
You're being kind, you're not supposed to lie.
naturally, everywhere the Torah is compared to water, simply because the water naturally descend down and the Torah came down to the lowest level. Just so water will find always the lowest spot. Fire, on the other hand, goes that way. Neshama is that way. Water is that way. The idea of Neshama, as we'll discover in chapter 5, what the Rabbi wants to share with us, is that when you're concentrating to study Torah, you occupy your mind into serving God, there is nothing else you can be occupied or can be doing or thinking about. And therefore, you have a direct, non-stop, without any other barrier connection to God. When I perform a mitzvah, when I give tzedakah, I can be praying. When I give tzedakah, I pray. While you do it, you say words. I can also be thinking about what am I going to say to somebody if I see him chatting, how am I going to yell at them? So you have 3 things at the same time. Not so with the study of Torah. And we will discover the beauty of deepening your mind into studying Torah, not just repeating what you study, but thinking about it deeply. Yes, Linda, you wanted to?
I was just gonna say, I mean, that's the one thing you're doing, that you're actually listening to God, you know, I mean, I guess in prayer you do, but in prayer you're talking. In Torah, you're listening,
Right.
so it's.
Listening
actually hearing what's
using
on
your
the-
brains, exactly. By listening is using your intellect. Prayer, it's an external. The Rabbi is going to talk about 3 circles that exist when we study Torah that don't exist with anything else. And those 3 circles connect us to God in a far deeper way than any other commandment. And that's why the study of Torah has been part of the Jewish life forever, not for you to achieve a certificate, not for a job, not to learn how to behave, so to say, even though it's very important. It is for connection to God. So when I study, I don't study because of I want to gain. It's because the establishment of that connection don't exist with any other mitzvah. And we'll study it next week. So we'll stop right here. Thank you very much.